By 1923, the world claimed it had moved on from World War I. 5 years had passed since the guns fell silent. The trenches were no longer filled with soldiers, and the headlines spoke of rebuilding, diplomacy, and a new international order. To outsiders, the Great War belonged to history books. But beneath the surface of calm words and signed agreements, the world was dangerously unstable. 1923 was not a year of battles between armies. It was a year when the consequences of the war finally began to boil. Accueillez Europe! The scars of World War I had not faded. In France and Belgium, entire regions were still recovering from devastation. Some villages had been rebuilt, but others remained abandoned, their ruins left as silent warnings. Fields still hid unexploded shells, and farmers continued to lose lives to weapons fired years earlier. The war no longer killed by bullets, it killed by memory and neglect. For veterans, 1923 felt like betrayal. During the war, they had been praised as heroes. In peace, many felt discarded. Physical wounds limited their ability to work. Mental wounds were invisible and misunderstood. The world expected gratitude and obedience, not pain and anger. Nightmares haunted countless former soldiers. The sound of thunder could still feel like artillery. Crowded streets caused panic. There were no counselors, no real treatment, only silence and shame. Veterans gathered in small groups, not to celebrate victory, but to remember fallen friends. Among those who had seen the trenches, words were often unnecessary. Silence said everything. In Britain, remembrance had become routine, almost mechanical. By 1923, war memorials were no longer new or shocking. People passed them daily without stopping. Names carved in stone were still there, but time had dulled public emotion. For families who had lost sons, time meant nothing. Grief did not fade simply because the world moved on. Children were growing up without fathers, shaped by stories rather than presents. Mothers carried responsibilities they had never expected to bear alone. The war had ended, but its absence filled every room. Germany, in 1923, stood at the center of crisis. The economy collapsed under the weight of reparations and political instability. Hyperinflation destroyed daily life. Money lost, value by the hour. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend their wages before prices rose again. Children played with bundles of worthless bank savings vanished overnight. Hunger spread. Anger followed. Many Germans felt humiliated and trapped. Former soldiers, hardened by war and embittered by defeat, believed their suffering was unjust. Radical political movements grew rapidly, promising strength, revenge, and restored pride. Street violence became common. Trust in democracy weakened. The Great War had planted seeds, and in 1923, those seeds began to grow. France responded with fear and force. Determined to secure reparations, French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland. What was meant as economic pressure became political disaster. German workers resisted through strikes. Tensions escalated. Europe once again stood on the edge of chaos, not from trenches, but from unresolved hatred. Peace existed on paper, but not in reality. Across Eastern Europe, the map drawn after World War I continued to crack. New nations struggled with fragile governments and ethnic conflict. Borders ignored cultural realities. Violence flared in disputed regions. The collapse of old empires had created freedom for some and instability for many. The world that emerged from World War I was not stable. It was exhausted. In 1923, international leaders continued to speak of cooperation. The League of Nations remained active, holding meetings and passing resolutions. Diplomacy promised progress, yet the League lacked real power. When nations acted in their own interests, there was little the world could do to stop them. Many sensed that another storm was forming, but few knew how to prevent it. Culture reflected the anxiety of the time. Writers, artists, and filmmakers portrayed a world stripped of illusions. War was no longer heroic. It was mechanical, meaningless, and cruel. A generation questioned nationalism, authority, and blind obedience. Faith and progress had been shaken beyond repair. Society felt older than its years. Yet, even in 1923, life refused to stop. Cafes were filled. Music played. Cinema offered escape from reality. Children laughed in streets rebuilt from rubble. Humanity continued forward, even when burdened by fear and memory. People adapted because survival demanded it. Veterans tried to rebuild identities beyond war. Families searched for stability. Nations balanced between cooperation and confrontation. The world existed in a fragile pause, unsure of its future. 1923 stood as a warning, written in economic collapse and political violence. The Great War had not taught humanity how to secure peace, only how to survive destruction. Without healing, resentment festered. Without understanding, fear grew stronger. History would later prove that the world failed to listen. World War I did not truly end in 1918. It poisoned peace in 1919. It haunted nations in 1920, 1921, and 1922. And in 1923, it revealed how fragile peace truly was. This is the true story of 1923. A year without trenches, yet full of conflict. A year of economic collapse and rising extremism. A year when peace existed only on paper. Because the war was over. But the fire it started was still burning beneath the ashes.